The 1980s refers to the years from 1980 through to 1989 that occurred in Canada, the United Kingdom, and the United States. Everywhere else, it was still 1910. It was a period of renewed optimism and economic liberalization. During this time, the word yuppie entered the lexicon, referring to the half-man, half-puppy created by nuclear testing. The decade saw the withdrawal of the Soviet troops, end of the Cold War, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the crack epidemic. The 80s were also well known and often ridiculed for the popular culture of the time, such as leg warmers, door knockers, and the B-52s. Population growth occurred in record numbers in the 80s, not only in developed regions but also in developed Western nations, where many newborns were the offspring of baby boomers, spawning what would soon to be called Generation X, commonly known as douchebags. But the 1980s also birthed the man, the legend, the avid collector of 17th century pornographic vases, Trilbey Donald Trilbey. Trilbey had an unconventional entrance to the world. He was remarkably born of a human mother and father, who interlocked genitalia in exchange a concocted mixture of sexual gametes and lust to produce it. His innovation changed the way children were produced, as the baby production company McDonald's had once cornered the market. McDonald's promptly liquidated, re-emerging as a fast food restaurant chain selling burgers and fries. Trilbey, a boy of simple stock, was not the brightest child. Though he had no physical or mental retardation, he was a retard in line with the definition of the common parlance, and would regularly eat his crayons and the box, and try and eat his own hand in the process. His father, Trilbey Donald Trilbey II, was a tough man, a farmer by trade who would always remind Trilbey, "You're nothing, and you're always gonna be nothing." However, Trilbey would go on to graduate from high school at the top of his remedial class, which is like saying you beat Stephen Hawking in the arm wrestling competition. Trilbey spent the next 20 years working at a Fuddruckers, but had the dream of doing something, anything, to prove his father wrong. It wasn't until 1979 when he heard a common adage that would change his life. That adage was, "It's like finding a needle in a haystack." From that day, Trilbey dedicated his life to training for that feat that would show his father and the world that he was more than a retarded Fuddrucker. And when that day came, in 1987, Trilbey wrote a letter to his parents and headed for Iowa, which was home to the largest haystack with a needle in it in the world. As he wound up at the side of that haystack, he drew a crowd of onlookers, and the local press, a young reporter at the time by the name of Truman Capote, asked him, "What are you doing out here at the largest haystack with a needle in it in the world?" Trilbey replied, "Proving I ain't nothing." Trilbey jumped into that large haystack, deep into that haystack, but unfortunately was never heard of again. But the story of Trilbey Donald Trilbey III, like the 1980s, lives on in the hearts of retards everywhere, who still say the word rad, and who believe that something spurious is not impossible. I've been Michael Rifkin, and you have just been nunchucked.